1 in 4 Canadians can't cover an unexpected expense of $500. No, I'm not joking. And yes, we are talking about Canada. We're not talking about Venezuela. We're talking about Canada. But this is the reality. And would you believe where this report comes from? It actually comes from the government. It comes from Statistics Canada. So let's take a look and see what is going on. 1 in 4 Canadians are unable to cover an unexpected expense of $500. In fall 2022, over 1/3, 35% of Canadians reported that it was difficult for their household to meet its financial needs in the previous 12 months. Sign of a booming economy. Because isn't that funny? Because I was just thinking as I said that of the Bank of Canada's article saying, you know, they may need to raise rates more because the economy is booming. And you've got 1 in 4 Canadians who are struggling to even afford $500 as an unexpected expense. I mean, it is just absolutely shocking to me. And I don't find that funny, but I find it funny how people still are believing that we are in some sort of utopia. We're more likely in a dystopia than a utopia. It's just absolutely insane. And this really shows it. It puts it right in your face. You can't argue with the data from the government. Or can you? I mean, I bet. I mean, if the government is saying 1 in 4, it's probably more like 1 in 2, 1 in 3. Let's face it, if the CP lie is anything to go by. When asked whether their household had the resources to cover an unexpected expense of $500, 26% said they would be unable to do so, with a slightly larger percentage of women reporting this difficulty than men. Further, while the vast majority of Canadians were concerned with rising gasoline and food prices, almost half, 44%, said they were very concerned with their household's ability to afford housing or rent. There you go. I mean, if you're a landlord or you even own a home, that's got to shock you both ways, because the reality is, if you're a landlord, you're sat there thinking, my tenants can barely afford to pay me the rent. What is going to happen if a recession comes along? You know, what is going to happen? Put 2 and 2 together for crying out loud. And then the same goes for if you own a home, you've got to be thinking, what? Nobody can afford their mortgage? What happens if there's a shock to the job market? What happens if people get laid off? Yeah, think it through, because when you take that thought to its logical conclusion, its rents go down, housing prices go down, you have a complete disaster and like a depression essentially, which is what we're heading towards. And this couldn't be illustrating this any clearer to me, that we are heading into a depression when you've got 1 in 4 who cannot afford an unexpected expense of $500. I think it is just crazy. And then it talks about young adults. Canadians in different regions are facing different financial pressures. You can see that consumer prices are increasing at a greater rate in Prince Edward Island and Manitoba. Additionally, when asked if their household could cover an unexpected expense of $500 today, 1/3, 33% of respondents in the Atlantic region replied they could not, followed by 28% in the Prairie region. And it said that respondents in British Columbia were best equipped to handle the expense, probably get it out of their home equity. But isn't that interesting? Because the prairie economies are booming, y'all. I mean, but nobody can afford a $500 expense. I mean, it's right behind Atlantic Canada. I mean, I don't think it matters what I say. The people who think things are booming are just going to continue to do so, no matter what data comes out or what surveys are done, even by the government, which is just unbelievable. So, you know what's really interesting is they put up this chart, which is rising housing prices influence younger Canadians' decision to move. And I totally agree with this. And this actually backs up what I said in another video. I actually said a couple of weeks ago that when I was subbing for the social club, over the summer, I was coming into contact with lots of young people who had moved out here from Ontario and BC, purely fixated on buying a house. Some of them had already done that. So, you know, I totally agree with this being a thing, that this is actually happening, because that's what I've seen as well. But the problem is that's a lot of weak hands, in my opinion, that are coming into the market. These are first-time home buyers. They're buying at the top of a bubble right before a recession. It's just kind of a recipe for disaster, I think, anyways. But you know, it is what it is. So do you not think this is some of the reason why people are in such a bind right now? When you look at Canadian household credit market debt to disposable income being at 180%, do people not think that, oh, maybe that's got something to do with it? Maybe people have got an insane amount of debt. And not only that, there's just been an insane amount of fraud. You know, the more and more I think about markets out in Ontario especially, I think that these markets are just full of fraud. Like, fraud is just rampant within these markets in the GTA. And I think a lot of it is you've just had immigrants come that really don't understand the rules, they don't understand the market, and they just come and they want to buy that house. And they find ways to do it. There are people that serve that. There's demand for that, so there are people serving it, creating fraudulent documents, doing all the rest of it. And I think this is more rampant than we actually realize. I think this is going to become a big, big problem in the future for the banking system. And you really just have to think about it, because people buying $2 million houses in places like Milton, families of 4, it just doesn't make sense, because when you boil it down to the probabilities and you look at the average income, the probability of them being able to afford it is just slim to nothing. So I think it's all a bit of a facade, this thing that the housing market is built on streets of gold. It's really not. One thing that is for sure is the subprime lending industry in Canada is absolutely massive. There's been a lot of demand from people who move to Canada and emigrate to Canada that they are going to need to buy a vehicle. Of course, the public transport is pretty damn bad in most cities within Canada. So that means essentially that everybody needs to buy a car. So when they get here, they need to buy a car. Now, the interesting thing is that the typical immigrant that comes to Canada earns a lot less than a Canadian does. Most immigrants earn less than $27,700 per year. That's going by the latest data available that we have, which is 2016. And if you look at the average income of a Canadian during that period, it was $57,000. So you are talking about 51% less income than the average Canadian these immigrants have. So they are coming to Canada, they're not flush with cash like real estate agents and everybody is telling you. That is not what it is. And after they've been here 3-4 months, got a couple of credit cards, they can go out and get an auto loan. And yes, they really honestly can and have done. And the thing is, I've actually seen this firsthand, how big this subprime lending industry is for auto loans. And it's absolutely huge. And all the big banks are participating in it as well. So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here. You might also like that video there. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye-bye.